the moment, and then we will have a presentation on the ERC goals from your research. And afterwards, you will be able to do all the questions you have. So welcome to everyone. And first of all, maybe a short information about the rules. We would like first to give the whole presentation before allowing questions. Then we will be recording the presentation and it will be put online for the people who could not participate. And if you have questions, you can put them or write them in the chat. And in the case we will not manage to answer them during the meeting, we will either put them in the FAQ or answer them afterwards. If you would like to answer a question, you want us to answer the question directly, please raise your hand and we will find the best person to answer you. And we will share the presentation at the end of the of this meeting. Maybe another important point is please mute yourself. Otherwise, we will have always constantly an echo. First of all, SERI team is going to present us the political situation. Many thanks to Masha Zurbrücken, who took the time to present us this part. Thank you. Please, Masha.
Well, thank you very much, Simona. You can hear me well, right? It's okay, perfect. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for organizing this, I think, very important meeting, exchange. And looking at the subject of this meeting, I would like to start, well, of course, with the basis actually that due to the participation status in Horizon Europe, the Federal Council decided on May 24 this year on transitional measures for the 23 work program of Horizon Europe and related programs and initiatives, and a total of 625 million Swiss francs are provided for these 23 measures. And this makes it up in the years 21 to 23 to 1.85 billion Swiss francs that are that can be used for transitional measures so far. As in previous years, these measures include direct funding for project participation in Horizon Europe collaborative projects, but then also measures for inaccessible parts of the program. And so looking at today, a total of 93 million Swiss francs has been earmarked for the measures presented today, namely the SNSF Consolidator and Advance Grant, as well as the Swiss Postdoctoral Fellowship 23. As in the past, SERI has mandated the SNSF to implement these measures, and I would really like to take the opportunity again to thank the colleagues at the SNSF for their tremendous effort in this matter. And we all know that it's also not for them an easy situation, but they just do it perfectly. Thank you very much. So it is clear to SERI that these measures cannot replace an association, and thus international competition for ERC funding. I think this lies in the nature of the matter of these calls. Yet these measures are really intended to cushion the situation until association and to enable the best possible transition once that we are to the time that we are associated then. And this then brings me to the present situation. As you know, there have been so far no changes to Switzerland's status in Horizon Europe yet. An early association to Horizon Europe and related programs is still the declared goal of the Federal Councils. We are ready, Switzerland is ready to negotiate, but the European Commission continues to consider our association to the EU programs such as Horizon Europe, but then also others like Digital Europe Program or Euratom or ITER in the light of the overall relationship, and links it to the open institutional questions between the EU and Switzerland. So the Federal Council wants to stabilize and further develop the proven bilateral path with the EU, and this includes participation in the current but also in the future EU programs, including the programs in education, research, and innovation, like
Hallo
Horizon,
Matthias. Hoi.
like Horizon Europe and Erasmus. And
Gut.
sorry,
Können wir das zusammen machen? Ich weiß
Sorry,
nicht, ob
that's
du
not
heute
me.
Nachmittag
Somebody is not
Zeit hast,
muted.
weil ich bin gerade
could you
jetzt.
please mute
Oh,
your phone?
Yeah, she's heard you. Thank you very much, Simona. So again, so you all know that there are ongoing exploratory talks between the European Commission and Switzerland, and they also are talking about the ongoing and the future, our participation in the ongoing and the future programs. If the talks with the EU continue well, progress well, the Federal Council will prepare to adopt a negotiation mandate by the end of the year. But again, as I said, the exploratory talks are ongoing, and it's just not possible to say whether in which direction they go, or better to say what the timing really is going to be. So whether anything will change in Switzerland's status and when cannot be said at this stage. And of course, we all know that you're also interested in the upcoming calls. However, due to this situation, it is really impossible to say at the moment whether Switzerland will have access to the ERC Starting and Consolidator Grant 24 of the ERC. But I guess it's fair to say that at least for the Starting Grant 24, it is quite unrealistic that in this short term, the call will all of a sudden open for Switzerland. But again, I mean, everything is possible, but thus yet quite unrealistic, to be honest. However, and for this reason, SER is currently examining funding of transitional measures for the 24 ERC calls, namely the Starting Consolidator Grant 24. This has also been updated on our webpage. It is too early to say anything about these calls, and Sarah will provide information in the course of this autumn with more. So that's also why this meeting is not about this upcoming ERC calls, but it's about what Simona has said in the beginning. I think with that I can close. Thank you again for listening to me, for participating, and there will be much more interesting and important information given throughout this meeting than what I was giving you. Thank you very much. And of course, I'm open for questions at the end, I think, Simona, right?
Yes. So
Perfect.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Masha. Maybe just for your information concerning Starting Grant, you can give us in written your question. We will, as soon as possible, then give you answer as soon we have more information. Maybe today's SNSF team, we have Florence Etlin, who will present Consolidator Grant and Advanced Grant. We have Marco Biri presenting SPF and myself. Thank you very much. And I can give you the word to Florence.
Thank you. Yes, so the SNSF Consolidated Grants 2023. I will first talk about the target group. So this call is open to researchers of any nationality who intend to conduct their research in Switzerland and who were awarded their PhD or equivalent degree between the 1st of January 2011 and the 16th of October 2016. And they should have shown research independence and contributions to science without the participation of their PhD supervisor. And here you can see listed are indicators for these benchmarks. You can also find them in the call document. Now, regarding the eligibility time window that I mentioned, there are exceptions that we accept for the prolongation of this time window. You can find them listed here, and in the General Implementation Regulations, it's clause 111. You can actually subtract the time in weeks that from the time since PhD, the actual delay. But in case of maternity, you can even subtract 18 months per child. Here in this next slide, you see the new call procedure. So there are a few changes as compared to the previous consolidator grants call. I'll come to those details in a minute. So at the moment, we're in the phase between the pre-registration and the submission deadline, which is the 16th of October 2023. And afterwards, there will be the evaluation by external experts and then by the panel members. And based on that, there will be a decision on who is going to be invited for the interviews. This will be communicated to the applicants by the end of March. And then the actual interviews, the meeting will take place on the 23rd and 24th of May. Afterwards, the ranked applications will go through various boards. There will be a funding line to set, and then we'll be ready to send out the decisions towards the end of July, and the earliest starting date is the 1st of August 2024. Now, the changes that I mentioned, so the most important ones concern the procedure. It's no longer a two-step procedure, but only a one-step procedure where we start with the evaluation of the full proposal instead of the extended synopsis that was only evaluated in step 1 in the previous call. And this full proposal will be evaluated by external reviewers and panel members, not only by the panel members as in the previous first step. This will then be the basis for the decision regarding the invitations to the interviews versus rejection. And then the interview meetings, that will actually be identical to the step 2 of the previous call. There are a few more changes, namely that now the standardized SNSF CV format must be used, not the template we had for the first consolidated grants call. However, no DMP needs to be submitted. Only for grants that are approved, it will be necessary to complete a DMP. And one last point, which is not a change, but it is still the same as for the previous call, the proposals still need to be submitted on MySNF, not on the new SNSF portal. Then one slide on the budget and duration. You may ask for a maximum of 1.75 million Swiss francs for a period of up to 5 years. And you may add or ask for an additional funding of up to 870,000 Swiss francs for the points here listed below. So for costs due to the move to Switzerland, for the acquisition or use of scientific infrastructure or major equipment, or for other major experimental and fieldwork costs, excluding personal costs. The evaluation criteria are still the same as for the first call. You can find more details on them in the call document. So there are 2 criteria regarding the scientific quality of the research project, groundbreaking nature and potential impact, as well as scientific approach. And there's 1 criterion on the applicant, intellectual capacity and creativity. Now, there are certain restrictions regarding relation to other funding. So an applicant may submit an application under the call identifier ERC 2023 COG, but they cannot be PI in any ERC Frontier project or SNSF Advanced Grants or SNSF Starting Grants and in an SNSF Consolidator Grants in parallel. And also researcher participating in an ongoing ERC Frontier Research Grant may not submit a proposal at the SNSF Consolidated Grants 2023 unless the existing project ends before the end of July 2025. Then the SNSF Consolidated Grant can only start once the ERC Frontier Research Grant has ended, and the latest starting date for the Consolidator 23 projects will be August 2025. And finally, one last slide on the previous call. So we had 54 million Swiss francs that were given to 30 projects out of 182 submitted ones, so with a rather low success rate of 17%. However, applicants who submitted in this first call and were rejected, they can submit again in this new call, no matter whether they were rejected in step 1 or step 2. However, the project will be treated as a new submission, not as a resubmission of the previous project. And with this, I hand over.
Thank you very much, Florence, for this information concerning Consolidated Grant. Then I give the word to Marco concerning Swiss Postdoctoral Fellowship.
Yes, thank you very much. So the Swiss Postdoctoral Fellowships, or in short SPF, are now facing its third submission deadline. The scheme is quite well established, but nevertheless, I would like to show you the main features of the instrument, and then also I will show a slide on the most frequently asked questions, and then I will also highlight the major changes of the upcoming call with respect to the last call. So the SPF, the aim, it's a transitional solution for the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships. It's open to researchers of any nationality, and also it's open to any research discipline. It offers expert scientific training and career development in Switzerland. In terms of eligibility criteria, applicants must have a PhD degree or must have defended their PhD at the time of the submission deadline. It's okay if you don't have your diploma yet, but you must have defended your PhD defense, your oral examination by the latest at the time of the submission deadline. Then there is the mobility rule, which states that applicants must not have resided or carried out their main activity, work studies, etc. in Switzerland for more than 12 months in the 36 months, 3 years immediately prior to the submission deadline. Then applicants can have up to 8 years after PhD. This eligibility period can also be extended by reasons that apply under clause 111 of the general implementation regulations for the funding regulation. So it's if you exceed 8 years after PhD, you can still make a request for extension. Then the eligible costs, you will get a salary, postdocs will get a salary, including social security contributions, and it's also possible to request research funds for research and conference attendances, for example. These are 24,000 Swiss francs for 2 years maximum. The evaluation is done in a fully remote setting by discipline-specific experts, and the criteria that apply for SPF are the same as for the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships, namely excellence, impact, quality, and efficiency of the implementation. Here you see also the success rates of the previous calls. In 21, it was around 10%, which was a very competitive call. We also received a lot of applications. 750 proposals were evaluated in that very first call. The last year, the success rate of SPF 22 was a bit higher, around 18%. We also received somewhat fewer applications. Then here a slide, as I just already said, on the most frequently asked questions we typically receive for the SPF. In terms of the supervisor, Ambizioni Eccellenza Prima Fellows are eligible. They can act as supervisors for SPF Fellows. And it's also possible that a supervisor can support more than one SPF applicant or fellow. However, in all these cases, we always request, of course, that supervision must be ensured for the whole duration of the project and for each grantee. Then the CV, now under SPF 23, we also introduced the new CV format, the new standardized CV format that must be used. Then the research plan, here it is very important to strictly follow the structure of the template we provide on the website. This template must not be changed by any means, the sections, because they also reflect the award criteria. And the limit is 10 pages of the research plan, and this includes includes references, tables, figures, etc. For the confirmation letters from the host institution and the supervisor, it's possible to sign them digitally. We accept this. Concerning resubmission here, we have potentially researchers who applied under 21, under 22, and maybe under both calls and would like to submit again under SPF 23. This is principally possible, but there is a restriction that applies concerning the evaluation score. If this score is lower than 6.3, which corresponds to 70% of the maximum score of 9, we have a 9-point scale, then the restriction is that the host institution must be changed for the new call, for the new proposal. A new host institution must be involved if the evaluation score was less than 6.3. This restriction does, however, not apply if it refers to a resubmission of an unsuccessful application under SPF 21. It only concerns 22. And it's also possible that if you applied twice under SPF 21 and 22, you can again apply under SPF 23, but then the resubmission restriction applies concerning of the score you received in your evaluation. Then we also have a restriction concerning parallel submissions with career funding schemes. So SPF with other career funding scheme is not possible. For if the funding periods overlap, it's only possible if the funding periods of these schemes do not overlap. However, a parallel submission with overlapping funding periods is possible for post-mobility return grants and ERC transitional measure schemes, for example, starting grants. Then here, at the last slide, the major changes of SPF 23 with respect to the previous call. I already said that we introduce the new CV format also for SPF. It's a standardized format. It has no research output list. Then we also omit the career plan. That's not required anymore as a document. So one document less, because in the research plan also career development aspects are considered under the award criteria. Then, as it holds for all SNF schemes, there is no data management plan required at the time of submission. It will only be required for approved grants. Then the timeline, the call is already open. It opened on September 1st. The submission deadline is 1st of December. It has no pre-registration, the SPF. The results will be communicated in June 24. The earliest project start is 1st of July 24, and the latest 1st of July 25. That brought me to the end of the presentation of the SPF, so I will hand over again to my colleague.
So thank you, Marco. And we go to the advanced grants. We have some preliminary information that we can give you. Please, Laurence.
Thank you, Simona. Yes, exactly. This information is all preliminary. It's not yet on the website because the call document has not been finalized and accepted by all the boards. So what we can already tell is that Most likely, the procedure will look very similar to the Consolidator Grants 2023 procedure. So this means no need to submit an extended synopsis, and there will be the standardized SNSF CV format that must be used, and all proposals will be sent out for expertization. It might be that we'll no longer have the interviews, but a rebuttal letter instead, but this is not yet clear. And here you see the preliminary timeline. So we plan to open the call in November and close it in January, mid-January. And the evaluation will go on till the end of December. The earliest project start will be the 1st of January 2025. That's as much as we can say at the moment.
So thank you very much. And then we can give the word to the people of Euro Research.
Thank you very much, Simona. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay,
perfectly.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, so as Masha mentioned, of course, things are unpredictable at this point, but we still find it worth it to give you a very brief overview of the calls that you might be expecting to have a look at once we are associated. So just to start out with, you have Sari's graphic here, and as you can see, there's a lot for which we are simply not eligible. Nevertheless, there are a few, so we will today be focusing on the ERC grants and the Marie Curie grants, as you can see there. All right, for ERC grants, we start with the starting grant. The starting grant is a project grant for 5 years with a budget of 1.5 million euros. And the specific eligibility window for this grant is between 2 and 7 years after your PhD. Moving upward from that, we have the Consolidator grant, a similar 5-year project duration, but with a slightly increased budget of 2 million. And then after that, we have grants for which there are no specific eligibility window criteria. So the first one of those is the Advanced grant. It's a similar single PI grant compared to similar to the Starting and Consolidator grant. Also 5-year projects, but again with a slightly increased budget, 2.5 million. Then, so these are the 3 grants, types of ERC grants that are again for single PIs. Moving on up from that, we have the Synergy grant. The Synergy grant is for longer projects with bigger budgets. So 6-year projects, 10 million euros, and these are for teams of 2 to 4 PIs. And then lastly, we have the proof of concept grant. These are smaller grants that are only available to people who've already had an ERC and they want to exploit the results of their current ERC grant. So as I mentioned, and as you saw on the first slide, there is only this grant, the Synergy grant, for which Switzerland, Swiss-based researchers are eligible to participate and eligible to receive funding from the European Commission. Nevertheless, again, it is worth going over. As Masha said, it is difficult to predict and everything is possible at this point. So I thought it's worth showing you the overall timeline. As you can see here, if we look at this left column to 2023, there are a couple open grants at the moment. Nevertheless, for those, it looks like we are more or less out. There is really no way. Nevertheless, the Synergy grant, which is currently open, the deadline is the 8th of November. Again, we are eligible for that one. Swiss-based researchers are eligible for funding for this grant. Then things where we can all hold out hope are all the grants that will be opening in mid to late 2024. These are on the right column here. So first we have the Advanced grant, and then later on in the year, the Starting grant, the Consolidator grant, and the Synergy grants. Those are the projected opening times. We don't have exact dates yet, but again, it's just going to be a matter of watch this space, because as soon as things change on the association front, these are the grants that you'll be looking at instead of the transitional measures. All right, just a couple changes to the ERC this year compared to previous years. Again, just to make you aware, if and when these grants become of interest to you. So the first 3 have to do with the changes to the evaluation process. So the first is there's a new panel now, and the social sciences panel called the Studies of Culture and Arts. This brings the total social sciences panel up to 8. Then further to that, the focus for ERC evaluation in any case will be slightly more on the project than on the PI. Up until now, it was the excellence of both. This will slightly change, and the evaluation will focus a bit more on the project. Lastly, in terms of evaluation, there are 2 new categories. So there's 2 different types of A marks that one can get after submitting an ERC proposal. The first is A and then invited to the interview, passed on to step 2, and the second is A but not invited to the step 2. And then lastly, two small changes, one to the eligibility. So the date of the eligibility starts from the successful defense of the PhD, no longer the award of the PhD. And then lastly, there's a new pilot scheme that the ERC has put in place in terms of advanced grants. This is the lump sum pilot scheme, and basically it allows people to be reimbursed for the sums that they have requested and not the actual cost that they will have incurred for their projects. All right, just a few words on evaluation before I come to the end shortly here. So for these 3 single PI grants, the evaluation is all pretty standard. There's 2-step evaluations, all in thematic panels. You submit to a specific panel of your choosing. The evaluation occurs within that panel, and then you are invited to an interview if you pass on. Whereas with the Synergy grant, it's similar, but instead of a 2-step, it's a 3-step evaluation procedure, but also again with an interview. And the proof of concept grant is a totally different animal with a very simple single step evaluation procedure. All right, lastly, just a few slight differences between the ERC and the current transitional measures that you've already heard about this morning. So with the ERC, there are many more panels. So there's 28 thematic panels in total. Again, as I mentioned, you have to choose which panel you submit to, whereas with the SNF, there's fewer panels, and those panels are formed once people submit, and they decide how many panels of different types are actually needed. Furthermore, in terms of evaluation, the aspect high risk, high gain has been totally removed in terms of ERC evaluation criteria, where this is still a criteria for the current SNF and Consolidator Grant Transitional Measure. In terms of the funding schedule, as I mentioned, there is one scheme, the advanced grant for the ERC, that it funds lump sums instead of actual costs, whereas with the SNF, it is entirely actual costs that are funded. And then lastly, one very small difference in terms of the eligibility windows. The starting grant is 2 to 7 years post-PhD, whereas the starting grant for the SNF, is 2 to 8 years post-PhD. And with that, I will hand over to my colleague, Sibylla Martinelli, who will tell you about the Marie Curie postdocs.
Thanks a lot. I take over so I can very briefly talk about the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship. This fellowship is a part of the MSCA, Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. I have to take control here of the slide. Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions within Horizon Europe. And you see here on this chart that the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship is another one of the mono-beneficiary grants that appear red on this chart, meaning researchers with a Swiss host institution are not eligible. And that is why the SNSF is implementing the Swiss postdoctoral fellowship in order to make up for the damage for Swiss researchers, actually. So, the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship has a strong focus on mobility as well, but also on the career development and training of researchers. It offers funding for excellent projects, also for skills development and training activities. And it is for postdoctoral researchers that have a maximum of 8 years of research experience after their PhD. The fellowship funds projects of a duration of 1 to 3 years, and additionally, if wished, a 6-month placement in the private sector. And this incentive aims at promoting career moves between sectors and organizations, and like this, stimulating innovation and knowledge transfer, and also expanding career opportunities for researchers, in line with the III dimension that postdoctoral fellowships strive for, so the internationality, intersectorality, and interdisciplinarity. To ensure geographic mobility, there is also the so-called mobility rule, as in the Swiss postdoctoral fellowship, which researchers must comply with in order to be eligible. And this mobility rule states that researchers should not have spent more than 12 months in the country of their future host institution in the 3 years prior to the call deadline. The funding here includes the researcher's salary, but also research training and networking costs, as well as overheads. There are annual calls for the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships. The 23 call just had its deadline mid-September, and the 24 call will open next April. And the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship comes in two flavors, the European and the global fellowship. And this represents from the European perspective the incoming and outgoing scheme. Okay, European fellowships are open to researchers of any nationality who wish to engage in RNI projects by either coming to Europe from any country in the world or moving within Europe. The standard duration of these fellowships must be between 12 and 24 months, and the host institution needs to be in an EU member state or associated country. And as you have seen on the chart I showed previously, institutions in Switzerland can't host these fellowships currently. However, as Switzerland is a third country currently, Swiss institutions can host the outgoing phase of global fellowships. And these are open to European nationals or long-term residents who wish to engage in RNI projects with organizations outside EU member states and associated countries. And they require an outgoing phase of minimum 12 and maximum 24 months in a non-associated third country, and a mandatory 1-year return phase to the return host in a member state or associated country. Yes, and I would like to emphasize that the MSCA fellowships are very similar to the Swiss postdoctoral fellowship. And yes, this is the main message here. But although the two funding instruments are very similar, there are certain differences between the MSCA PF of the EU and the Swiss postdoctoral fellowship implemented by the SNSF. And these are mainly regarding the topics mentioned on this slide. And if somebody is interested in knowing more details, I'm very happy to provide a more detailed analysis. But I think in this context, I won't go into more detail here. I will just show you the MSCA NCP team at Eurosearch, Véronique Sordet, Isabelle Spüler, and myself. And we are very happy to answer any kind of question regarding the EU schemes, like the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions postdoctoral fellowship. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sibylla. Thank you, everyone who